to another night of Good Natured. And guess what? You don't have to listen to me for very long. We've got wildlife biologist Allison with us this evening.
Hello, everyone.
We're going to be talking about the amazing adaptations that wood frogs have and some of the work Allison has been doing with wood frogs. But first of all, not to overstate the obvious, but we are actually not in the usual setting here at Good Natured World Headquarters. This is what the first floor looks like. And the reason we moved down here was one, this way that Allison doesn't have to deal with the mess I have upstairs with all the nature parts and everything. But two, you remember a few weeks ago, guys, I had shared with you some photos of what this house looked like back in the day. We think this was dating back to the 1800s. You can see the old folks at home there sitting on the front porch. This window is still in our vestibule. When you come in, you see that these are the same doors are still on the front of the house. In fact, a lot of this trim and everything still exists. This is the hot day. These folks are sitting here with these dark clothes on, and the windows are open. And it was probably middle of summertime. Look at the leaves on the trees and everything. Well, anyway, this was a photo that was given to us by the History Museum. And it wasn't the only photo they gave us. There's another one, and I'm gonna see, share this screen. There we go. No, I don't want to do that. No. Okay. So this is a photo of the interior, and this is where we're sitting right now. So the window that's behind Allison, in this photo here, I had some shears draped over it. There's a fireplace that would be kind of behind where I'm sitting. That's been removed, but the wall is still angled like it was in this photo. All these pictures here of, I'm guessing, their relative up above the fireplace. There's some really interesting things here that, if they ever perfect time travel, I would love to just see my stops. The old spinning wheel and the rocking chairs here. This table, boy, my aunt had a table very similar to this one that she'd keep plants on and stuff. The old, gosh, I don't know if this is a Gone with the Wind lamp, but it was probably not electric. I'm guessing it was an oil lamp back in the day. And then this, I don't know what this, it looks sort of, I don't know what that is. Something, it's not paper dolls, but it's almost like tribal art or something. But anyway, just for a change of pace, we are down here, and we're sitting in a room that people have been sitting in for well over 100 years. So anyway, I will stop with that. And now you can see, like, so behind me over here, so that's where the fireplace was, and behind Allison there is the windows that were in the photo. I was going to show you the pocket doors too, but which was on either side of that photo, but Allison had to help me get those rearranging. I don't want to mess too much with them. They are original too, but they're got to make sure we put things back the way we found them. So if you ever want to tour over here, I'd be glad to show you. It's a really cool building. Love working here. Anyway, let's get on with tonight's nature news and all the cool things that Allison wants to share with us. So we're gonna go back to our screen share, and let's see, we will start with let me close that and close that and open this. All right, so here is our first image And it goes back to last Friday. Now, some of you know, and I may have mentioned this on past weeks, that there's a group of nature nerds and we walk every Friday. And last Friday we had made plans. We knew it was going to be cold and we knew it was going to be windy. So we made plans to go walk somewhere where there were a lot of trees and possibly less wind. You know, the way the trees will help block the wind. So we chose Fabian East. And so those of you local folks, you might recognize this parking lot. I tell you, last Friday I had my pick of parking places. Place was pretty empty. This was Friday afternoon. I think the wind chill, well, it was something below zero. You know, they talk about those feels like temperatures, and it felt like it was pretty cold out. I wanted to try and take a selfie so I could show you that I was really there, but my glasses were so fogged up. And I'm not too good with selfies anyway, but let's just suffice to say that I had the place to myself. There weren't any other humans there, although there were some footprints on the trails. I was not the only human there that day. There had been some other people. Looked like somebody had been walking their dog. But there were nonetheless, there were signs of animals that had been on the trail. This was a little mousie that had hopped across the trail. Oh, actually, no, you know what? That looks more like bird footprints, doesn't it? I did see 2 juncos while I was there. That was the only actual wildlife I saw out and about. But there was a lone set of deer tracks that was walking along one of the paths, or had been walking along. And then remember, I think it was last year, we did a kind of a primer of winter tracks in the snow. And you know, rabbits and squirrels are 2 of our most common. And if you look at this track and you see there's the 2 almost like rabbit ears here that come down into a single, which is actually the 2 front feet here. So the 2 back feet make this these 2 impressions, and then there's the where the 2 front feet come behind it. And so there's a little bunny that had been hopping along the trail as well. I didn't stay real long. I checked my steps when I got back in the car, and I didn't even crack 2,000. So it was just enough to, you know, say I did it, and to get the heart rate up a little bit. And when I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, I knew it was time to get back to the car. But it was still cool. All right, so now, folks, you can plug your ears, or you can listen to this. But it's going to be a rant. I shared this photo with you probably, I don't know, it was a month, probably over a month ago, of this beautiful hornet's nest. So again, local folks, to orient you, the cross street here is 4th Street, and where the car is coming towards us here, this is Prairie. So I'm looking east on Prairie, and look at this gorgeous hornet's nest up in the tree. Remember, we talked about this. I think at the time I talked about how important they are as a wintertime source of protein for birds. And, you know, maybe if a squirrel can walk on a thin branch like that, but there's they're just an acceptable or accepted source of food for our local wildlife. Well, I walked by this tree last week, and guess what? The nest was gone. Now, if we go back and we look, and this thing, it's high in the air. It's not like a car's going to hit it, or even a truck. If somebody wanted to cut it down, they'd probably have to have some special equipment, like, I don't know, a bucket truck to get to it. And I thought, well, you know, maybe it blew down. You know, but although this picture was taken before we had the storm, I know, maybe, and we'd had some winds, maybe, you know, something happened to it. Well, then I think I'd shared this photo with you too. This is the hornet's nest that was in the parkway tree in front of my house. And I looked this past weekend, and I noticed that nest is gone too. And I thought, what the heck? So I emailed our friends over at Public Works, and I said, hey, you know, just happened to notice there's a couple of bald-faced hornet nests I've been keeping my eye on, and I'm not keeping my eye on them anymore because they're gone. What happened? Is there any policy where the city is, removing these nests? Well, the good news is there is no formal policy of nest removal, but the bad news is if a resident calls and requests that the nest is taken down, they take it down for absolutely no reason. I think there's still this lasting this erroneous impression that these nests are going to have the hornets in them again next year, and they are not reused. And with this cold spell that we've just been through, there's no way there's anything in there that's still alive. All there is in there is frozen bodies of larvae and adults. And again, that's protein for our local wildlife. Can you see, I'm getting a little worked up again. This may turn out to be a column, but before it runs in the newspaper, I am going to bring it up at the next Natural Resources Commission meeting to see if there's something we can do to educate residents about this and how there's no need for these nests to be removed. Okay. Rant over. If you turn the volume down, you can turn it back up again because we're going to move on. We've got some more things to share here. So this is actually not brand new news. It was news in 2022, but it was a few months ago that Governor Pritzker signed I don't know, a proclamation or something. I don't know how we get state symbols designated, but Illinois now has a state snake, the milksnake, the eastern milksnake. Well, actually, I don't even know if they designated eastern, Allison. It might have just been milksnake because what I read talked about that there are two milksnakes present in Illinois. Anyway, we have an eastern milksnake at Hickory Knolls. This is Mary. She's absolutely gorgeous. People don't realize that we've got pretty snakes like this around. A quick glance, you might think, oh, geez, it's got some bright colors. Maybe it's venomous, and they're not. But there are some milk snakes that do look very similar to the venomous coral snakes. But in Mary's case, it's just her markings are sort of similar to our local fox snakes. Fox snakes are not as brightly colored. There's a lot of milk snakes around here that are not as bright as Mary either, that are not as brightly colored as Mary. They're probably just as smart as she is. But they, that red, especially as the snake matures, this red can get more and more brownish to it. But you notice how these light colors are occurring in bands. We had a state reptile. We still have a state reptile of the painted turtle, but maybe it's been relegated now to being just the state turtle. It doesn't get to be, ahead of all the reptiles. But what I got a kick out of too was the announcement listed, they included a link for more information, and they listed all of these common names that besides milk snake, you can call this an adder, a chin snake, a checkered adder, a chicken snake, a cowsucker, the Highland adder, a house moccasin, the leopard spotted snake, the milk sucker. There's a couple more over here. The sand king, the sackum snake, and the thunder and lightning snake. So milk snake sounds a little too much like milkshake for your taste, and you want to wow somebody with your knowledge of common names. There's a whole bunch more that you can choose from for our recently designated state snake, the milk snake. All right, just another one or two. Oh yeah, this little thing. This is just another gee whiz thing. But Allison, you had some comments on this as well. So this was just yesterday. I was coming back from a program. This is at the corner or the intersection of McLean Boulevard, where it hits Route 31. So this is looking east. The Fox River would be on the other side of those trees down there, and then the quarry is on the right over here. but there was just wave after wave of Canada geese. And really, they would seem to be heading towards the river. This photo was taken, I think, between 3:30 and 4. So, getting towards dusk, and these birds, they spend the days feeding in the cornfields, and then they head back to the river for safety. They can sleep on the water then at night, and they have fewer risk of predators there. But Allison, what did you happen to see?
Yeah, I think it was yesterday or the day before that, but I did see some geese hunters in the cornfield near the La Fox train station where they had all their decoys up. So it's that time where they're moving. So
Yeah,
hunters are taking advantage of that.
there's another reason to leave the cornfields. You're getting shot at.
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple people had mentioned to me that they'd heard gunshots along the river, and hunting this is a game species, and that we are in the midst of goose season. I can't speak to the letter of the law, the hunting laws, but I know that you can't discharge a weapon within the city limits, but if you're outside, if you're in an area that allows the shooting, then it's perfectly legal to shoot these birds. And I hear they're pretty tasty. There's a stretch of the river up by actually 5 Islands, where Tekawitha Woods and John Dewar is. There's some blinds on some of those islands that people hunt from there. And then down towards Red Oak, there was a small area of unincorporated land where people were hunting geese on the river. When I worked down at Red Oak, there'd be Saturday mornings where I'd be out with scouts, in the fall, and you'd hear this blah, 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 blah. What was that? It's just, yeah. The goose, in fact, Allison and I were talking before we sat down for the program here. A few years ago, there were some studies being made of our local goose populations to see in the wintertime what are they made up of, because we've got our resident subspecies, which is the giant Canada goose. But then we get visitors from the north. I believe it's the Hudson's Bay subspecies that comes down here, and historically those geese used to go farther south. I remember as a kid, it was a big deal when those geese would stop over, as they were making their way south. And now they're stopping here. And one of the questions is, why? Is it that is climate change playing a role? Our winters are warmer than they used to be. They're shorter than they used to be. Have the birds figured out that they don't have to go as far south as they used to? Another thought is that they see all of our resident geese, and they have this decoy mentality. So when they see other geese, they want to stop and see what all the fuss is about. So I don't know the status of that research, but I know it was being funded by the airports, because they have a vested interest in having these big birds flying around. And one bird hitting an engine can have a devastating effect on the plane and the people in it and everything, not to mention the bird. But they were trying to sort out, just what percentage of the winter birds are residents and what percentage are migratory. And hopefully that will lead to some management decisions that could maybe result in a slight reduction here and there to make things safer and healthier for the birds to eat a lot of birds together like this. And if the disease, some of them, come in with carrying an illness like avian flu is prevalent in waterfowl. Because maybe the problem will solve itself. I'm not saying they're a problem, because I always said I would rather be in a flock of geese than a flock of humans. But the wave after wave of geese that I saw yesterday was just really, really remarkable. I think with that, yeah, just more geese. Bob, I have to thank you for this little announcement. Bob and Drini had put a notice out to King County Audubon, but I thought some of you folks might want to know as well. If you feed your birds thistle or Nyjer seed, it's those little black seeds there, and you notice that they're not the seed is not being consumed, you might want to go out and buy some fresh seed. There was some seed that was processed in a different manner, and it produced seeds that the birds didn't care for. So if you feed the birds and you're feeding thistle slash Nyjer or Nyjer slash thistle and it's not being eaten, maybe go out and get a new bag and start again, because whatever process they tried, they're now going back to the process that works and that the birds enjoy. Well, just a little announcement courtesy of Bob in King County Audubon. And I think with that, yeah, we're gonna start in just a second here with Allison, but I wanted to back up to last week. Meredith, I don't know if you're here tonight, but last week would have been December 20th, and that was before our storm event. The cold was really more of a factor than the snow. Allison, I don't know if you heard the predictions here, but I mean, when they first started talking about that storm, they were saying, oh, it could be a foot or more of snow. We've got the European model, we got this model, and look out, batten down the hatches. We're going to get hammered, slammed, whatever. And snowfall, and as the week went on, the snowfall got smaller and smaller. But when we were meeting last Tuesday, we knew that the storm was coming, and Meredith had raised the question of what does the park district do to help wildlife? And I had addressed that more from a human perspective and the things that we do to keep our buildings open, and if members of the public need a place to come to warm up or to get out of the weather, we try to be there for them. And as far as the wildlife goes, we have our natural areas. But I did want to go back to the topic just one more time, because I didn't want to make it sound like we're cruel and hard-hearted. It's just that our wildlife, for the most part, have some really phenomenal adaptations to deal with cold weather. Most of our fur-bearing animals have layers of fur. They've got insulating fur, and then they've got guard fur on top of that helps keep them warm and helps keep them dry. Our birds have feathers that they can puff out and create layers, not just of feathers, but also of air in between, and that air acts as insulation. And then we've got our animals that have neither fur nor feathers, and I think that's where we're going tonight. The reptiles and the amphibians, they have completely different strategies for coping. Our snakes, they'll dive down into old rodent burrows, or sometimes a crawl space, where they can go to. They want to find a place that's cool. They don't have to stay warm all winter. In fact, it actually helps them if their body temperature is colder, because then they're not really metabolizing much, but they can't freeze. But the wood frogs,
Yes, wood frogs have an amazing ability. It's they're one of a kind right now, as far as science knows. Very different adaptation for what other amphibians do. Most amphibians like to dive deep into ponds, like the deepest part, and bury themselves in the muck and just kind of overwinter down in those depths. But the wood frog has something completely different, and science is really interested on how these creatures do this, because it is, let me tell you, amazing. So, but I'm gonna say that a little amazement for later. We're just gonna talk a little bit about the wood frog in general first. So just kind of baiting you along,
Well,
waiting for that.
So just so everybody knows that's your hand, right,
Yes,
Allison?
that
So
is.
this isn't just somebody who's read about wood frogs or has heard somebody talk about wood frogs, but this is hands-on experience that we're witnessing here.
Yes, so yes, that is my hand. Where I work, we do a yearly frog count, and we do it twice a year. We survey, try to find as many frogs as we can, and we do capture frogs in our hands so that we can swab them for chytrid fungi, which is decimating a lot of amphibian populations, but there is hope. We have found that there are resistant populations of amphibians, so yay.
Yeah.
But we still like to collect those chytrid fungi samples just so that we can keep tabs on how much is in the system. But you can tell a wood frog because they.
I'm sorry, Allison, can we back up? So how do you do that?
So you basically capture the frog in a net, which
Okay.
they're sometimes really hard to catch because they're sneaky little guys.
And what season was this?
So this is for us, it's like in May all the way until August. We do it twice. So usually at the end of May or beginning of June, and then sometime in July. So
Okay.
this one I think was in July.
Okay.
And this should be a female if I remember correctly. But basically you take this cotton swab and you swab the cotton swab like 25 times underneath the chin, the belly, the arms, the legs, everywhere, so you can get.
Does it tickle? Does it tickle them? Are they like? Are they just thinking they're gonna die?
I think they just feel. I feel bad because I'm like, I'm sorry. This is for your own good. Each time I handle an animal, I'm like, I'm so sorry.
The same thing.
Yeah, stressing me out, stressing the frog. I'm like, please, I'm sorry. This is for your own good. I have a whole conversation with the animal, whatever animal I'm working with.
So you're holding it with one hand, you're
Mhm.
swabbing it with the other.
Yep.
And are they're struggling, or do they?
You know,
just kind of go?
eventually they just kind of give up.
And then is there a certain like, do you try to accomplish this like in less than 5 minutes or less than 2 minutes?
Yeah, you try to keep contact to a minimum. And I do like to take photos so that it's good education. And also there's a photo to the frog, to the vial that is being sent off.
Gotcha.
So yeah, but mostly for identification and education purposes. But it's usually like, yeah, under 5 minutes. You get really good with working with just like one hand. And not squishing the frog. Like when you're holding the frog, it's very gently enough so that they don't hop out, but they not squished.
Gotcha.
So yeah. Let's see. Well, before I talk about the identification, their habitat range. It's an eastern and northeastern, eastern, and northern species, all the way from the Appalachians, from Maine, coming over to Illinois, a little bit in Illinois. There's historical records of the wood frog in southern Illinois and also in northern Illinois. And then it goes all the way up into northern Wisconsin, into northern Minnesota, and then into Canada and Alaska. And there are some populations in the Rockies, which is the population that I survey, but it's just like pocket populations. So just in isolated situations for some reason. I mean, the Rocky Mountains are cool. I mean, that's why I'm there, but that's another topic. But no, I do love Illinois. I mean, I grew up here too, but anyway.
That's right. Yeah, and we should probably mention, Allison, last time we talked to you, you were in Wyoming.
Yes.
But you will soon be moving to Colorado.
Yes, I will be moving an hour south to Colorado. I got a new job there, so I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So I get to hang out with the populations in the Northern Rockies in Colorado. So yay. They do like the woodlands. Most of the adults, that's where they'll be after breeding season. For the breeding season, they'll be in the ephemeral pools, vernal pools, open ponds surrounded by forests. So wood frog, they like the woods. It's in their name. And so now for the description, They vary in colors, mostly the browns, but the best way to tell a wood frog from a lot of other frogs is that they have this nice, well, she has a really dark morph frog, but there's this nice black mask right under her eye from her
Oh, like
snout.
a robber mask.
Yeah, all the way to the edge of her mouth there. Yep, it's called the robber mouth or robber mask. And I think in the other picture, before I switch, this is a good picture of like the underbelly. It's lighter color than the top. The cream color tan to white. I've also seen frogs that are more of the brownish green, and
Okay,
then a lighter, a very light tan.
gotcha.
And then for the wood frogs up in Wyoming, they have this nice white stripe that goes down the back there.
So a robber mask and a racing stripe
Yeah.
all on one animal.
At least in the populations in Wyoming. But
Interesting.
all wood frogs have, like, I don't know if you can see it here, but there's like these two ridges that come from the
Oh yeah,
behind the eyes and down on both sides here.
like what leopard frogs have.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Green
and
frogs.
yeah, I feel like the leopard frogs have a more distinct.
Yeah, I think theirs are
Yeah.
different color.
And then, see, I wrote it down here. It's called the dorsal folds.
Okay.
So that's a nice little trivia question if ever you're in a trivia game. And
Where are the folds on the frog?
yeah, what are they called? The dorsal folds. But let's see.
Now, is she full of eggs? Because she looks really chunky there.
She's not. She had already laid her eggs.
Oh, so
There's,
she's just chunky.
yeah, females are bigger than the males,
Okay.
sometimes by a lot. And you can tell the males because they have like these thumbs that are very specialized for mating. That,
Okay.
hold on to the female.
Okay.
Let's see.
Now, is that considered a good sized wood frog that you're holding there? 'Cause
Yeah.
it looks about the size of like a meatball.
Yeah.
They're not. So there's that looks smaller than say a green frog, certainly smaller than a bullfrog.
Mhm.
But then fatter than a leopard frog.
Yeah, this is probably the biggest wood frog I've come across.
Okay.
They can sometimes be bigger, I've been told, but the adults are probably, or at least the female adults are around average that size, and then the males are a little bit, I want to say a little bit less, or they're a little bit streamlined,
Okay.
and then a little bit stouter.
Gotcha.
And then the toadlets are just adorable.
Oh, I remember being up in let's see, I was in it's Minnesota. It was Itasca State Park, which
Okay.
is where they have then you were stationed in Minnesota
Yeah,
what, about
Deer-
5 years ago.
Yeah, Deer River. I've actually been to that state park. It's pretty
Okay.
cool. You can walk across the Mississippi.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, it's where the Mississippi River originates up there. And there was some sort of a wood frog migration going on. I actually we were driving from where we were staying to there's one of the park naturalists was doing a program, and I actually pulled off and we walked to the program because the road was covered with, and they were all wood frogs. They were all wood frogs.
That'd be cool to see.
And I'm trying to think, that was probably Labor Day weekend. So I don't know if this was, and I don't remember, weather conditions or anything, if they were, if there'd been some rain. I know a lot of times rain will prompt frogs to move around because they can take advantage of the humidity, the higher moisture conditions, and not run the risk of drying out. But yeah, I mean, I started to think of all the people that had driven to the naturalist program and how many were going to squish those frogs when they left. But
hopefully there's frog troll.
yeah, scooch them off the road.
Yeah.
But those frogs, as I remember, had a little. You said this individual was pretty dark. That the ones I remember, those I remember had more of it's like a grayish khaki color to them.
Yeah, I've seen many males like that too, and yeah, this was like the darkest I've ever seen too, which was fun to see. But I think, do we have a call?
We do, you courtesy of you. So let me see if I can get this to play. I'm gonna hold this over here by the microphone. Turn it up. So this is a recording of Minnesota. This is a male, right? And when you showed this to me, Allison, let it go. That sounded to me, it sounded really different than the frog calls that we play when we're doing our frog monitoring training. So and just to clarify, so Allison was talking about in the range of the species and how they're eastern United States and then northern and like I said, I've seen them in Minnesota, but here in King County, we don't have legitimate records. There's people who said they thought they've seen them and they thought they've heard them, but then when it comes time to, it's like Bigfoot, they don't have, the photo that was on my camera disappeared, or my wife erased the recording, is what one man told me. But they are working, studying a population in Lake County, so we know we have them up there. And then in the 2022 Calling Frog Survey results that were recently released by the Peggy Nodebart Museum, they said wood frogs were only detected in 2% of the sites, and those sites were in Lake County, Illinois, and in Porter County, Indiana. But anyway, when we do the trainings for the monitors for those sites, I'm gonna play this. This is the call we play here. Start again. Okay, so you kind of get the idea, but you're saying there's regional variations.
Can be, yes.
Sort of like dialects.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that with birds too,
Yep.
that there's, depending on where you're listening at, they can sound different. So frogs do the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I know, like when we're training people to become frog monitors, we introduced the 13 species in the Chicago region by the order in which they call, and we always start off with wood frogs because they're the first ones to get going.
Yep. And that's a good segue to why they're the first one to emerge.
Let's talk about why.
Yeah, so this is what we're all been waiting for. Like, how do they survive winter? How do they hibernate? Well, they find a cozy spot in the fall, whether it's in the leaf litter or woody debris in the forest, and then they freeze solid.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
so like a night like this, when it is what was it, like 4 degrees? Oh, actually it's
a heat wave.
It's a balmy 23. I misspoke. It was 4 degrees this morning when I got up.
Yeah. But yeah, they actually freeze solid. Like for the winter, they go into like this cryo state, like actual suspended animation where their heart stops, their brain function stops, and they actually stop breathing.
Wow.
Yeah. And
so
then,
they're like Walt Disney.
yeah. Like the rumor says, yeah. But yeah, and then once it starts warming up in the fall, or in the spring, when the temperatures start warming up, they'll just start hopping away.
That is so cool. So
So
I gotta ask how.
Yeah. So what scientists are finding is that the frog produces this glucose or glycosine, the sugar, blood sugar, and it makes their blood kind of like this sugary kind of syrup kind of thing that it coats the outer layer of their organs.
Okay. Does it push out like the water then, so that they're no?
No, it just protects their organs from freezing. It it protects their cells from oh,
Like expanding and
Yeah,
it's exploding. Like,
exactly. Yes.
whenever I think of things
Yeah.
freezing, I always think of the times I've put cans of pop in the
Yes.
freezer and I've forgotten them and they've exploded.
It prevents their cells from being damaged when they freeze. There you go.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to. Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, brain.
that's
But yeah, it's like a sugary antifreeze.
so they're not going down, like a snake. Like a snake doesn't have the sort of protection. A snake, like we mentioned earlier, they have to go down, try to get ideally below the frost line, and that's where chipmunk burrows are. That's how deep woodchuck burrows are. But they need something like that so that they're cold, but they're still. I've always heard the sweet spot is like 38 degrees, so it's
Mhm.
not, it's cold, and their metabolism is going to be very low, so they're not going to be burning up whatever fat reserves they have, but they're not so cold that they're going to freeze. But
Yeah.
these guys,
No, they just like
would.
no, they welcome the like freeze me.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I heard one description is that they basically become like cold frozen frog stones.
Frog stones.
Frog shaped rocks basically in the wintertime.
Wow.
Yeah, and so a lot of different programs are looking into, like NASA is looking into the wood frog because of space travel, going into that suspended state of animation. And then also the medical industry too is to use the technique to preserve organs outside of the human body for transplant, protecting it so that they
sure.
can use it for later. So it's really cool that, in nature, we can find these adaptations that these creatures have already established and then researching them to better mankind. That's why we
Well,
should protect our
Yeah, well, that's
species.
it. We don't know what we have,
Yeah.
and we're losing so many things. But wood frogs, now they're they they're they're not that common in in fact, like I said, I don't think we have any records of Kane County wood frogs, but it's not to say that they're an endangered species. It's just where their range falls. We're not really in a hot spot for wood frogs. Where you were doing this research, though, were there a lot of wood frogs around?
In the particular pond that we were at, oh yeah, there were a lot of wood frogs there. And there's active research going on right now. Actually, this survey that we do every year is part of a bigger project called the Rocky Mountain Amphibian Survey, RMAP, through the University of Wyoming.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different, we call them encatchments, just basically wetland areas that they have designated as like potential wood frog habitat. And so they have volunteers, they have collaborators like the US Forest Service, the Fish and Wildlife, BLM, going out and surveying these designated areas. And some of these areas have been surveyed for years. And so they have that awesome data to show the trends and continue to show the trends, because it is such an isolated population, like, or at least in the region.
Okay. And so the chytrid fungus that you were swabbing for, that's something that's all over, right? It's not just isolated in the Rockies. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's something I know we've been concerned about here as well.
Yeah, I think there's still some populations that are still chytrid free. We do take a lot of precautions when we do these surveys. We do spray down all our equipment afterwards with bleach substance when we're back back at base. And then there's also like the fungicide that we spray too. We make sure we get all the dirt off of our boots and make sure we don't contaminate other places. So.
Send the population backwards. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Freeze resistant frog. Are there symptoms of infected frogs that you check for, or is it is this something that's kind of like a silent?
You know, I know there are symptoms, I just don't know them.
Oh.
For sure, like I
Uh.
have a guess, I know it's a fungi, so I think there are some signs of like white fuzziness, which is the mycelium of the
Okay.
fungi. But that I'm not sure if it's internal or external, because I actually haven't seen it myself.
Gotcha.
So,
Well, yeah, before we started tonight, folks, I was talking to Allison about the work that she was doing, and I know I read this somewhere, and I cannot remember where. It might be in some of the files I have archived, but that this chytrid fungus, which is has killed off populations of frogs in certain areas. It's not anything new. That it was detected in preserved samples, preserved specimens, but it doesn't necessarily mean if a frog is infected, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to die. And you said that there's populations, but seems to have
Yeah.
become resistant to it.
yes, so one of the populations that aren't wood frogs that we survey for is the boreal toad, which is a sensitive species because there's very few populations, at least in the area I work. And we found that there is a population where it's very heavily chytrid fungi, high amounts of chytrid fungi in that system, because it's just touristy around. We have a highway that goes
Okay.
through there, and hunters with their boots and all that fun stuff, and people from out of town. But the toads seem to be doing great. I mean, we saw a lot of toadlets last year, so we're like, yay, they're
Okay.
still okay. And yeah, we take a bunch of samples because there's just so many frogs there or toads there that we can swab. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the reason why the wood frog can breed so early in the season is because they can just thaw out and hop
And
right
there they are.
ready for breeding.
And you said that, so they're in these ponds. These are ephemeral ponds,
Some are
by the-
ephemerals,
and
yeah.
they like ponds that are ephemeral ponds that are surrounded by woods. That's the ideal habitat, is
Well,
it? Or
I know it, they like ponds in general, like it
Okay.
doesn't have to be ephemeral, ephemeral is great, but
so they will breed in larger
yes,
waters too.
yeah,
Okay.
actually our main pond is a huge giant pond. I'm not sure how deep. I know at least the edge of it can go down to my thigh because I've fallen in. But I know it's probably deeper in the middle there, but yeah, it's any pond really they find suitable that's surrounded by woods, because the adults do eventually move out to the woods.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. So this is a frog. So they use the pond for breeding, but then they go somewhere else. Is
Yeah,
that
they
right?
start moving out, and usually by the end of like July, mid-August, they're usually, if they're not toadlets or froglets, they are the
No.
adults are usually.
These guys, but they don't. So this is a great picture, by the way. I love
Thank
this.
you.
But these frogs don't have toe pads, so they're not like tree frogs where they're climbing. They're
They're ground.
pretty terrestrial. Or,
Yeah, and actually their front feet, they don't have webs. They're
okay.
not webbed in front. But yeah,
Do they dig at all?
you know,
They don't, because a toad doesn't have webs on its front feet, but their digits are thicker. They're stubbier looking.
I think they're mostly, they like the kind of outer edges of the ponds. There's
Okay.
a lot of, oh man, there's so many bugs when we do this. So it's great. A lot of nymphs that you see, dragonfly nymphs and
Okay.
dragonflies and spiders, and it's awesome.
And this lady frog here has certainly helped herself
Oh,
to
yeah.
quite a few of those. That reminds me of a question I had when you were talking about how they freeze solid and they go into this suspended state.
Mhm.
Do you know the lifespan of a wood frog is? And I know people always ask me that, and it varies so much, because wood frogs could live for a long time, but if they are in Itasca State Park and they're crossing a road,
Yeah,
and they cross at the wrong time, their lifespan is going to be
shorter,
quite a
yeah.
bit shorter. So And when you read about lifespans, that's oftentimes it's an average, it's not a guarantee. And they look at, and sometimes they'll even state, well, if the animal survives its first year, it can have a life expectancy of such and such. So sometimes they take out all the ones that because the first year can be really tough, no matter what animal we're talking about. But are these like I don't know. I have no idea. Because I like salamanders. I was always surprised when I remember learning about tiger salamanders and how like 20 years is not unusual for a tiger salamander. But it seems like frogs are shorter lived than that. But
yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that one. I just know the cool frozen facts. How to identify them.
Well, and this fungus, like you mentioned, the touristy areas, so we've got white nose fungus that's killing our bats, and we've got the snake fungal disease that's killing our snakes. And there's I don't remember if it's a fungus or a bacteria now in some of our turtle populations. It's like, seems like wherever people go, we bring some sort of pathogen along with it. And it's nothing new. I mean, look what the European settlers did to the native populations here with smallpox blankets and everything,
I do have good news about bats, though. There are vaccines that are working. So
no kidding.
Yeah.
For white nose?
Yes, for white nose.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, actually right before.
We should have led with that. We'll have to call you again, Allison, when you're maybe when you're back home again, we can do a thing on bats. Oh, that's good news.
I went to a webinar about that. There's some promise out there. So yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. So maybe we can get ahead of some of these things.
Yeah, there's some really cool science going on that they're utilizing right now, and pretty awesome.
Well, that's cool. Well, I know we kind of covered a lot of the points you want to make. I noticed that we had some chats, and usually when I'm doing this, I'm by myself, and I wait and I do the chats at the end because I can't do two things at once. But I suppose I could have been checking these while you were talking. But let's just see here what we've got. I'm going to move this out of the way, and we'll go up to the top here. Okay, Meredith. So you're here tonight, Meredith. Hi. One of the reasons you asked was you saw a lot of dead squirrels during that polar vortex.
Right.
Which one was that, Meredith? Was that the really, really cold one? Like,
yeah, like the first one before that we never heard of polar vortex.
Yes. And so they just didn't survive, huh?
Yeah, it was by that Peggy Norbert Museum.
Okay.
In the city, and I mean there were like 30 dead squirrels. It was disgusting, actually.
So that's like fell out of the trees.
I have no idea, which just was really odd.
That's interesting though. So there we're talking about an urban population, and I wonder if maybe some of the the adaptations they rely on, they get a little soft in the city. Maybe they're feeding on a lot of human sourced foods.
Yeah, that could be the case, because a lot of acorns, they do have that nice fat to them.
Yeah,
maybe it's just they didn't build up enough fat. They ate the wrong foods.
Yeah,
because
that's it. So yeah, we didn't. I don't recall seeing dead squirrels out here. Although it's funny. Also, after we got that that polar vortex, because I remember going out that day. I went to a seminar that day, and the streets were empty. But I got a call from one of the local newspaper editors. They wanted to know how many deer died as a result of the polar vortex. And if a deer is somehow compromised with illness or injury, then there's a chance they might not survive. But most deer, they do change to their winter coats, and the deer, the individual hairs are almost like tubes. They're pretty wide, but then there's air inside, and air is a great insulator. So I wasn't able to give the reporter a number.
Yeah.
Well, 78 deer died. We don't know, but a lot of the animals, they just, and I know like this most recent cold blast that we had, the squirrels in the neighborhood stayed holed up inside their I think most of the ones in my neighborhood are in leafy nests. We don't have a lot of tree cavities, but there was actually someone, and this was not the gray squirrel or the eastern fox squirrel that we have around here. This was a Siberian squirrel, but they build leafy nests, and the temperature inside their leaf nests, even when it was Siberian cold of like 40 below, it was something like 80 degrees or something, because their body heat, those layers of leaves create so much insulation that the squirrels stay nice and toasty warm. So yeah, Meredith, what I wanted to say, I didn't mean to make light of your question last week, but we do trust that the animals have the adaptations that have developed over the millennia to get them through these cold spells. And I think, I know as I've gotten older, I've been a lot more sensitive to cold, but then I look at, what got bare skin, a lot of bare skin. And I just have to layer up in order to compensate for it. But wow, well, we'll if anybody sees any dead squirrel, or if you're aware of loss of life, I know opossums. I have a feeling we probably lost some opossums because they are very poorly adapted to cold. They've got thin coats of fur even in the winter, and their tail is bare, their ears are bare, their feet are bare, their nose is bare. Oh yeah, it's a good question, Meredith, and I didn't mean to make light of it last week. Allison, you work for a federal agency.
I do.
All right, that's about as much as we can say about that. Otherwise, we'd have to sign releases and all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
Oh, Jerry wants to know what happens if there's a freak warm spell.
I think they would refreeze.
So they would thaw out.
I think maybe some might perish, but I think for the most part
they just would refreeze.
Yeah, because they still have that sugar, glucose.
So it wouldn't be warm enough for long enough to.
Yeah, unless it was like warm for like weeks on end. I think of a few days of warm up, I think it's okay. But if it's weeks of warm up, like just a freak month of.
Well, it's something that figures into animal behavior and animal response to our surroundings besides temperature is photoperiod or day length. And I think, Jerry, if the weather warms up for a brief couple of days, I don't know that the frogs would be convinced that it's spring, because the days are they're really attuned to how long the sun is out. But with that said, these are frogs in this area. They're heading to their breeding ponds in February. So they're somehow able to break through that frozen solid stage, even when it's not all that warm out. They need to have the water open. But the frogs and our tiger salamanders too. We start Ryan, our restoration ecologist, he gets his drift fences up in February so that he can get those early migrating salamanders as they're heading to their breeding ponds. And as soon as there's some open water that they can get access to, they're doing what they need to do. And then we don't see them again for a whole other year. Okay, and Greg and Kelly, who have been monitoring frogs for a number of years. I know they are always teaching us, they always teach us to listen carefully for wood frogs during monitoring, but we've never heard them here in Kane County. Are they extirpated here, or were they never really here to begin with?
That's a good question. One way to find out is to go through records. I know when I was doing some research for, I think it was the forest preserve when I was doing, or when I was here seasonally. I know you can go back to different newspapers and stuff like that, and sometimes you can find old survey results, but since we don't have that data, we don't know. And one thing that technology is allowing us to do is to set up microphones in remote areas and record songs, which is really neat.
Well, and to your point, Greg and Kelly, so the Calling Frogs survey results for 2022 were just released, and I think I said earlier that there was only 2% of the survey sites had wood frogs, but in the notes for those results, they said that Porter County, Indiana, does seem to have several locations with active ponds that have wood frogs breeding in them, but those sites have been orphaned, so there's nobody monitoring them right now. Kane County, the place I'd always heard that where these rumors, these Bigfoot like rumors have come from, has been Binney Forest Preserve, which I think has the habitat that you were describing. There's ephemeral ponds, there's certainly woods there. It's marshy. I think Binney Marsh, I think, is part of the forest preserve. So, but yeah, there, as far as I know, we do not have any Kane County records. And you know what? One thought too. You might have noticed how the first monitoring period keeps creeping earlier and earlier into February. One thought with the Calling Frog survey is that people weren't getting out soon enough. And correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, this is the species that is described as being explosive breeders, where it's just a day or two and then they're done. Is that what you've experienced in the Rocky Mountains, or no? I'm thinking no, because you're thinking about it.
I'm gonna say again, I don't know the answer because we don't get out there early enough.
Gotcha. Yeah, because you're doing a completely different sort
Yes,
of
we're doing
research. You're not doing a
yeah.
breeding survey. Yeah. So one of the thoughts too is that maybe we weren't sending monitors out soon enough to hear them breeding, doing their calls. And again, with frogs, it's the males typically that are they're calling, and it's the females and listening. And the Calling Frog survey is trying to get an idea of frog populations based on the calls that are being emitted by the males. So yeah, I keep dancing around that question. I've always heard about wood frogs in this area, but the data is not backing that up. So I think all the more reason to keep surveying to see. If they're in Lake County, so they're 2 counties away. I don't think, well, I can't say for sure if McHenry has any or not, but there wasn't anything in the survey that indicated, the Calling Frog survey that indicated it. The wildlife biologist at McHenry, other results. So I think we'll keep training people on it, Greg and Kelly, and maybe we'll be able to find that there is a population.
Yeah, the more ears out there, the better you can
Better,
detect.
because you said that they're in both northern and southern Illinois.
Yes,
right?
yeah,
So,
from the historical maps, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it would be cool to get out to this pond that we survey for and listen to them in early spring.
Yeah.
But we can't get to it unless we're on a snowmobile, and it's a very, very long way by snowmobile.
Yeah.
And we don't have
And you
some-
don't have the ability to freeze solid and
Yeah.
go into suspended animation. So it is.
Yeah, especially last week, our temperatures were like, I think, where I lived, it got to like -70 with wind chill, so it was great.
Wow, -70. So here we are limping down. It's -4.
Yeah,
but
but
the
then
wind chill, it was -20.
Yeah, but today it was like
-70. Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, last week it was like negative, whatever, and then today it was in the 40s. upper 40s. It's great.
There's up and down. Well, we got, let's see, Nancy says, I saw a cat dragging a dead squirrel this afternoon in Grundy County, wondered about this, but perhaps it froze. Yeah, that could be. It's always hard to say when you see something dead like that, if it was, it could have been roadkill, could have been frozen.
Cat could have gotten it.
Cat could have gotten it. Yeah. Yeah. My old neighbors, they had, it's kind of sickening, but they let their cat roam, and they had a display in their wall of their garage, all the tails of all the things he killed. But yeah, so if animals do they're much better equipped to deal with this, these, what the weather throws in. But with that said, I am a little concerned. So now they're predicting rain at the end of the week. So we're looking, a lot of us, I know, are looking forward to a little bit of warm weather, because we had a whole week of cold weather. And the temperature is going to, I think it's going to be a high of 50, which sounds really balmy. And weather guy pointed out that we're going to have a feels like temperature that's like 90 degrees different than it was last week. When the feels like was like 30 below, and now it's going to feel like it's 60. But those when it rains, that, you know, that water, if it penetrates the fur, if it penetrates the feathers, even though it's warmer out, it's actually harder to survive when that dampness gets through the fur. Whereas, you know, the snow, it's easier to shed snow off of the feathers and the fur than it is to shed water that's, you know, pounding and getting through to those under layers. So yeah, they but you know, I saw a coyote Christmas night, and it was not warm out, and it was, you know, carrying something in its mouth that it had found to eat. So they're, you know, survival of the fittest, as we say. Well, gosh, you know, I just looked, we're rambling on here. It's 9:09, which means the good-natured hour has gone over once again. I don't know if anybody has anything else they'd care to share, anything for the good of the group. If not, we're going to go ahead and knock off for tonight. Allison, thank you so much for your time. It's great to have you here in
Thanks for having
person.
me.
Yeah. Safe travels as you head back west, and maybe we can dial into your expertise again sometime soon.
I'd be happy to.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks to you, Allison. Thank you, everybody. Happy and merry. When we see you next week, it's going to be 2023. So Happy New Year too. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Allison.
Pam.
Okay, Happy New Year.
Bye.
Happy New Year, everybody. Have a great
Happy
night.
New Year.
Good night.
Yeah. Good night. Always takes feeling.